Much like in life, in the NBA, timing's everything. A moment of hesitation or overeagerness can give milliseconds the power to sculpt legacies. When you break it down, basketball is, after all, a game that relies on timing. The greats are able to master it and use every inch of leverage as advantage. But if you're a fellow hoops junkie, you've often wondered about the other guys, the ones who weren't as great because they can never get the timing right. The ones who sat and watched their elite peers become champions, all while ironically showing us glimpses into the future of basketball. This series argues that at least 4 players from the history of the league could thrive in today's NBA. These are those players, their stories, and what could have been. In this episode, we take a look at Arvydas Sabonis. This is Before Their Time, presented by ManCaveSports. Let's play a game. If you were to build the ideal NBA player in a lab, who would you model his game after?
It's a good question.
Well, for one, you gotta have size for physical advantages in the paint. That's a must. A decent amount of speed and quickness to leverage the pace of the game is a necessity. Defensive awareness and knowing where to be to make big stops is paramount in every champion. Efficient shooting, especially in the modern game, has become invaluable. Gotta have vision to create plays and identify defensive lapses, throw in mental toughness for the playoffs, and arduous endgame situations. This player would have to be the ultimate culmination of size, talent, and versatility. Not necessarily the best player ever, but the most ideal from a purely skill and frame perspective. My apologies to Nick Wright, but it's not LeBron. He's arguably the GOAT, but for this exercise, he's too short. It's not David Robinson, who was never a great passer. It's not even Giannis, who had his struggles along the perimeter. The player who best matches his criteria? Arvydas Sabonis. As if birthed from the imagination of J.R.R. Tolkien, the 7'3" Lithuanian center was a rare stretch 5 who could be trusted on both ends of the court, and especially with the ball in his hands. Unlike many international peers, Sabonis was a physical force in the paint during a very physical era in the NBA. He played with skill and elegance. He was one of the rare guys to attack Shaq and embrace the contact. He had the shooting of Dirk, the creativity of Larry Bird, and an ability to crash the boards that was reminiscent of Moses Malone. He averaged 12 and 7 on 50% from the field and 78% from the line. But numbers are just the tip of the iceberg. To truly understand the ideal player for the modern game, we gotta dive into his roots. Much like Drazen Petrovic, Arvydas Sabonis was born into an incredibly violent time in Eastern European history. Lithuania is a country of 2.3 million people. But don't let small size fool you. Lithuanians take their basketball seriously, as evidenced by boasting an astronomical 162 local clubs. From the tie-dye jerseys at the '92 Olympics to almost shocking the world and beating the US in the 2000 Olympic semis, basketball and Lithuania share a very special relationship. During the nearly 60-year Soviet occupation, the game became so much more. Because of strict political regulations, Lithuanian players were forced to play for their occupants. From the age of 15 onwards, Sabonis led the Soviets to international dominance, winning the 1985 Eurobasket MVP, the FIBA World Cup a year later, and then Olympic gold in 1988. His play on the court was widely praised, and rightfully so. It was also during this time that, despite team doctors recommending rest, Soviet coaches forced the young big to play all year round. This lack of necessary rest led to nagging leg injuries, peaking with a severe Achilles tear in 1986. In hindsight, it's really a miracle Arvydas was able to play till he was 38. Nonetheless, Sabonis was indisputably the star of those teams and regularly dominated international competition. This dichotomy between freedom on the court and off-court personal imprisonment was the foundation of Arvydas Sabonis, a legacy of international glory that was denied its due of NBA greatness for reasons larger than the sport. Well, by the early 90s, the USSR collapsed in on itself, and the door was finally open for the Lithuanian big. After leading Real Madrid to back-to-back Spanish League titles, Sabonis officially announced that he was coming to the NBA. The Portland Trailblazers selected Arvydas Sabonis with the 24th overall pick in the 1986 draft. By the time he actually arrived in the States in 1995, the Lithuanian was 30 years old. Pair that with a decade of heavy use, and it's not exactly an ideal starting point for a rookie. In fact, when Blazers team physicians conducted standard medical exams on the big, they claimed he qualified for a handicap spot. But for Sabonis, it didn't matter how much speed and athleticism were lost. He did a complete 180, shifting his play from an offensive bruiser who could dominate the paint to a crafty stretch 5, capable of leveraging his size and strength to scoop up rebounds over oftentimes younger and faster players. His game evolved into the perfect alchemy of size, touch, and vision. He could size up like a big, hold off in the corner like a 3-and-D wing, or distribute like a guard. He exposed defenses to an All-NBA rookie first-team appearance, and instantly became an impact bet. Despite Sabonis playing even better in the playoffs, the Blazers could never get over the hump, in a Western Conference dominated by some of the greatest to ever play the game. For the next 5 seasons, Portland would fall victim to the brilliance of the Spurs and the Lakers. By 2003, their window closed, and soon after, Sabonis returned to Lithuania, having officially retired from the NBA. The world's changed a lot since the 90s, and basketball's no exception. If Sabonis had grown up in an independent Lithuania, his career would be drastically different. He would have probably entered the NBA at a younger age, and therefore had the chance to develop sooner. He would be even more encouraged to make plays and shoot threes, which we already know he was one of the best at for his position. In fact, if you extrapolate his best international statistics that we have available, he was a borderline 50-40-90 player, and that's post-Achilles injury. For those of you doubting his ability to face such superiorly athletic bigs, he outdueled the 23-year-old David Robinson in the gold medal game of the 1986 FIBA World Championship. This guy. If you can hang with the Admiral in the paint, you could pretty much hang with the best of them. In fact, legendary coach Rick Carlisle, who was an assistant in Portland in the 90s, has gone on record to say Sabonis would have been a top 15 player all time with holding injuries. That's from a coach who worked with Dirk Nowitzki, Luka Doncic, Jason Kidd, and Reggie Miller. So based on that, the analytics, and his play type, it's safe to say he would be just fine adjusting to the modern era. Good basketball elevates good basketball, and I really think Sabonis would have benefited from more athletic and skilled competition, let alone teammates. Under the proper tutelage, his skills and mental grasp of the game could have led to even better results on the court. Was the timing good? I mean, sure, definitely wasn't bad. He still had a Hall of Fame career and is a legend in Lithuania and Portland. He was the only international basketballer to rival the stature of the late great Drazen Petrovic, which says more than enough to his impact on the game globally. The NBA has changed a lot since his debut, and a majority of the changes catered to his strengths, like the ability to shoot, spread the floor, and create scoring opportunities via passing and positioning. Watching these games back, you really get an idea of how talented Arvydas was. He could pretty much do everything coaches asked of him. He could pass similar to Nikola Jokic, create shots like pre-injury Kristaps Porzingis, and rebound like peak Kevin Love. In other words, he could be the definitive offensive big of our time. Stronger than Karl Anthony Towns, more tenacious than DeAndre Ayton, and lengthier than Joel Embiid. Arvydas Sabonis would be an absolute problem in today's NBA. Like defense? Plug him in as a 5 and watch him dominate the paint with size. Like offense? Let him set some high screens and roll to the rim, capably collecting misses and tips with ease. If placed along the perimeter, his shooting could stretch out the opposing team and create a plethora of passing lanes and defensive conflicts in the process. At the very least, he would in all likelihood be a max contract type of guy, and the ideal second piece of a championship team. Not quite the alpha dog, but a consistently brilliant big who could keep you in the race for the Larry O'Brien Trophy, year in and year out. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the bio, and Tier 4 contributors are allowed into our Dynasty League, so hit that up if that sounds like your kind of thing. And if you want to see more Man Cave videos, check out our channel. Oh, and don't forget the mullet, because, I mean, come on.